Enjoy listening to the story. Prejudice and societal judgment separated lovers for 40 years, but their love went nowhere. Subscribe and like, and here we go. The warm California sun danced across the lush green lawn, casting a gentle glow over the quaint suburban neighborhood. Maya Thompson, her long dark hair cascading down her shoulders, sat on the porch steps, lost in the deep emotional connection to the town's essence of her youth. The familiar sights and sounds of her small hometown enveloped her, reminding her of a time when the world seemed simpler, full of promise and possibility. Maya's reverie was interrupted by the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. She watched as a tall, slender figure emerged, his dark eyes shining with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. It was David Jen, the boy she had loved with a fierceness that defied the societal barriers that threatened to keep them apart. As David approached, Maya's heart began to race. It had been decades since they had last seen each other, yet the connection they had shared as teenagers still lingered, a delicate thread that had never fully unraveled. "Maya!" David breathed, his voice laced with a hint of disbelief. "I can't believe it's really you." Maya rose to her feet, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "David," she replied, her tone warm yet guarded. "It's been a long time." They stood there for a moment, the weight of the past hanging between them, before David tentatively reached out and grasped Maya's hand. The familiar touch sent a shiver down her spine, and she found herself unable to look away from his gaze. "I've thought about you every day," David confessed, his eyes searching hers. "I never stopped loving you, Maya." Maya felt a lump form in her throat, the memories of their shared past flooding back with such intensity that it threatened to overwhelm her. She had spent so many years trying to move on, to bury the pain of their separation, but now, with David standing before her, it all came rushing back. "David, Maya paused, her voice trembling slightly. "I've missed you too so much." They stood there, lost in the moment, oblivious to the world around them. For a brief, fleeting instant, it was as if no time had passed, and they were once again the young, carefree lovers who had dared to defy the expectations of their families and society. But the spell was quickly broken as the sound of a car door slamming jolted them back to the present. Maya glanced up to see her sister Eleanor striding towards them, a warm smile on her face. "Maya!" "I saw David's car and had to come say hello," Eleanor exclaimed, pulling her sister into a tight embrace. Turning to David, she greeted him with equal enthusiasm. "David, it's so good to see you. It's been far too long." David returned the hug, a grateful expression on his face. "It's wonderful to see you too, Eleanor. I can hardly believe it." As the three of them stood together, the weight of the past hung heavy in the air. Maya could feel the unspoken questions and the lingering tensions that had once threatened to tear them apart. But there was also a sense of hope, a glimmer of the possibility that they might finally have a chance to confront the demons of their shared history and find a way to move forward. Don't you both come inside?" Maya suggested, her voice soft but steady. "I think we have a lot to catch up on." David nodded, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. "I'd like that very much." As they stepped through the familiar front door, Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. So much had changed, and yet, in many ways, it felt as if no time had passed at all. The past and the present collided, and she knew that the journey ahead would be a challenging one, filled with both joy and pain. But in this moment, surrounded by the comforting embrace of her sister and the man she had once loved with all her heart, Maya felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, after all these years, they could find a way to rekindle the love that had once burned so brightly between them. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the small California town. Maya Thompson stood on her front porch, watching the last rays of daylight fade. A bittersweet smile played on her lips as memories of her youth flooded her mind. It had been decades since she had walked these familiar streets, yet the town felt frozen in time. The same oak tree stood in the center of the town square, its branches swaying gently in the evening breeze. The old diner where she and David had shared countless milkshakes and stolen glances still stood, its neon sign flickering to life as the sky darkened. Maya's heart ached at the thought of David. Their love had been so pure, so full of promise, yet the weight of their family's expectations had torn them apart. She remembered the day vividly, the pain etched into her very being. It was a warm summer evening, the kind that seemed to stretch on forever. Maya and David had stolen away to their favorite spot, a secluded hilltop that overlooked the town. They lay side by side, fingers intertwined, gazing up at the stars. "I wish we could stay here forever," David whispered, his voice tinged with wistfulness. Maya squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I know, but you know what our families want for us." David sighed heavily, his brow furrowed. "I don't care what they want. I love you, Maya. That's all that matters to me." Maya felt a lump in her throat. "I love you too, David. But you know they'll never accept us. They want us to marry within our own races, to uphold their traditions." "Then let's run away," David urged, his eyes pleading. "We can start a new life, just the two of us." Maya shook her head, the tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I can't do that to my family. To your family. The consequences would be too great." David pulled her into his arms, holding her as she wept. "I don't want to lose you, Maya. I can't imagine my life without you." "And I can't imagine mine without you," Maya choked out. "But we have to be realistic. Our families will never accept this, no matter how much we love each other." They held each other in silence, their hearts breaking with the weight of their decision. Finally, Maya pulled away, her eyes filled with a bitter-sweet resolve. "We have to end this, David, for both our sakes." David's face crumpled, and he nodded slowly, his own tears falling freely. "I understand. But it doesn't make it any easier." They clung to each other, their final moments together filled with a desperate, aching love. When they finally parted, it was with the knowledge that their lives would never be the same. Maya wiped away a stray tear, the memory still as vivid as the day it had happened. She knew that David had faced similar heartbreak, torn between his love for her and his desire to honor his family's wishes. As she stepped back inside, she found her sister, Eleanor, waiting for her. Eleanor's eyes were filled with empathy, and she pulled Maya into a comforting embrace. "I know it's hard, Maya," she murmured, "but you did the right thing for both of you." Maya nodded, her voice trembling. "It was the most difficult decision I've ever had to make, but I couldn't bear the thought of our families disowning us, of the pain and isolation we would have faced." Eleanor squeezed her sister's hand. "You've always been so strong, Maya, and you've built a good life for yourself, even without David." Maya managed a small smile. "I try, but there's always been a part of me that wonders what could have been. What if we had been brave enough to run away?" "You can't live with those what-ifs, Maya," Eleanor said gently. "You did what you thought was best at the time, and you've made a good life for yourself. Maybe now, after all these years, there's a chance for you and David to reconnect." Maya's eyes widened. "Do you really think so?" Eleanor nodded, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "I do, and I'll be here to support you, no matter what happens." Maya pulled her sister into another hug, grateful for her unwavering support. As she sat down on the couch, her thoughts drifted back to David, wondering where he was and how he had fared all these years. Little did she know, he was grappling with his own painful memories, half a world away. The years following Maya and David's painful separation unfolded like a tapestry of contrasting lives. While their hearts remained intertwined, their paths diverged, leading them on separate journeys of self-discovery and personal growth. Maya, her youthful dreams of a life with David shattered, threw herself into her work as a teacher. The classroom became her sanctuary, a place where she could guide young minds and find solace in the pursuit of knowledge. Yet, beneath the surface, a lingering melancholy persisted. She had learned to navigate the complexities of her biracial identity, but the void left by David's absence remained. In the evenings, Maya would retreat to her small apartment, its walls adorned with vibrant paintings that reflected her creative spirit. She found solace in the brushstrokes, losing herself in the act of creation. The canvases became a canvas for her emotions, a way to express the yearning and the ache that had become a constant companion. As the years passed, Maya's determination to forge her own path only grew stronger. She became a respected educator, known for her unwavering commitment to her students and her ability to inspire them. Yet, a part of her heart remained tethered to the past, to the love she had once shared with David. Meanwhile, David's journey took a different turn. Driven by a desire to prove himself and make his immigrant parents proud, he immersed himself in the world of business. He climbed the corporate ladder, becoming a successful entrepreneur. But the emptiness he felt within only seemed to deepen with each promotion and accolade. David's father, Mr. Chen, had always been a stern and traditional man, and his disapproval of David's relationship with Maya had only intensified after their separation. Mr. Chen's expectations weighed heavily on David, who found himself torn between his father's traditional values and his own yearning for a life beyond the confines of his family's expectations. However, one evening, as Mr. Chen stood by the window and watched David and Maya share a heartfelt moment in the garden, he felt a pang of something he had never acknowledged before, a longing to understand. For the first time, he realized the sincerity of their connection, and it stirred an inner conflict within him. As the years passed, David's professional accomplishments did little to fill the void in his heart. He found himself increasingly isolated, surrounded by the trappings of success, but lacking the fulfillment he craved. The memories of Maya, their shared laughter, and the dreams they had once nurtured haunted him, a constant reminder of the life he had been forced to leave behind. In the quiet moments, David would find himself staring out the window of his high-rise office, his gaze drifting towards the horizon. It was in these solitary contemplations that he would allow himself to revisit the past, to remember the carefree days when he and Maya had walked hand in hand, their futures stretching out before them, full of promise and possibility. The passage of time had not diminished the love they had once shared, but it had transformed it into a bittersweet ache that lingered in the depths of their hearts. Both Maya and David had learned to navigate the complexities of their lives, but the pull of their shared history remained, a constant reminder of the love they had been forced to relinquish. As the years unfolded, Maya and David's separate journeys continued, each step they took a testament to their resilience and their determination to find a way to live meaningful lives. But the thread that had once bound them together remained, a silent connection that transcended the boundaries of time and distance. Maya sat on the porch swing, her fingers tracing the worn wood as she lost herself in memories. The gentle breeze carried the scent of jasmine, a fragrance that had always reminded her of her youth. She closed her eyes, allowing the past to wash over her. Decades had passed since she had last seen David, but the memories of his smile, the cadence of his voice, and their stolen moments together felt like yesterday. The past lingered like a bittersweet melody, reminding her of the weight of every choice they had made. Maya sighed, her heart heavy with the weight of regret. She had spent so many years trying to bury those feelings, to move on with her life. But deep down, a part of her had always longed for David, for the life they could have had together. After leaving her hometown, Maya had thrown herself into her work, becoming a respected teacher. It was a career that had brought her a sense of purpose, but it had also been a means of distraction, a way to keep the pain of her past at bay. She had found solace in the classroom, in the eager faces of her students, but there had always been a lingering emptiness that no amount of professional success could fill. As the years passed, Maya had learned to live with the ache in her heart. She had found fulfillment in other ways, through her art and the unwavering support of her sister Eleanor. But there were moments, like now, when the memories would resurface and she would find herself longing for what could have been. Maya opened her eyes and gazed out at the familiar landscape. The town had changed, but the essence of it remained the same. It was a place that held both joy and sorrow, a tapestry of memories that she had never fully untangled. Across town, David sat in his study, staring at the framed photograph on his desk. It was an image from their teenage years, captured on a warm summer day when the world had seemed full of promise. He traced the outline of Maya's face, his fingers lingering on the curve of her smile. For so long, David had tried to bury the pain of their separation, to focus on building a successful career and pleasing his traditional father. But no matter how much he had achieved, a part of him had always felt incomplete, as if a vital piece of himself had been left behind. David had never truly forgiven his father for the role he had played in tearing him and Maya apart. The old man's unyielding beliefs and expectations had cast a long shadow over their relationship, robbing them of the chance to forge their own path. Even now, decades later, David could still hear his father's disapproving voice echoing in his mind. "She's not one of us, son. You can't throw away everything we've worked for a girl like that." David clenched his jaw, the familiar sting of resentment flaring up within him. He had spent so many years trying to prove himself, to live up to his father's standards, only to realize that true happiness had always been within his grasp, if only he had been brave enough to reach for it. As he gazed at the photograph, David felt a wave of longing wash over him. He wondered what his life would have been like if he and Maya had run away together, if they had defied their families and built a life of their own. Would they have found the happiness they had so desperately craved? Or would the weight of their decision have ultimately torn them apart? These were the questions that had haunted David for years, the what-ifs that had kept him up at night, tormenting him with the possibility of a different life. He had tried to move on, to find fulfillment in his work and his relationships, but a part of him had always remained tethered to the memory of Maya, to the love they had once shared. Now, with the unexpected reconnection on social media, David found himself grappling with a mix of emotions. Hope, fear, and a deep, abiding love all warred within him, leaving him unsure of how to proceed. He knew that if he reached out to Maya, it would mean confronting the ghosts of their past, a prospect that both thrilled and terrified him. David sighed, setting the photograph down and running a hand through his graying hair. He had spent so many years trying to outrun his regrets, but now they had caught up with him, demanding to be reckoned with. As he stared out the window, he knew that the time had come to face his demons, to finally confront the choices he had made all those years ago. Maya Thompson stared at the screen of her laptop, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She had been scrolling through social media, a habit she had developed in her retirement, when a familiar face caught her eye. It was David Chen, the man she had loved with every fiber of her being all those years ago. Her heart raced as she took in his image, the years having been kind to him, his features still etched in her memory. Hesitantly, she typed out a message, her fingers trembling. "David? Is that really you?" She hit send, her breath caught in her throat as she waited for a response. The minutes felt like an eternity, and just as she was about to close the laptop, a notification popped up. "Maya, I can't believe it's you!" "Oh." David's reply appeared on the screen, and Maya felt a wave of emotions wash over her. Tears threatened to spill from her eyes as she read his words, a lifetime of memories flooding back. Quickly, she typed a response. "It's been so long. How have you been?" The words felt inadequate, but she needed to know, needed to hear his voice again, even if it was through the confines of a digital screen. David's reply came swiftly. "I've been, well, I suppose, busy with work, but something has always felt missing. And you? How have you been, Maya?" Maya took a deep breath, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. "I've been doing all right, all things considered. Retired now, but I still keep myself busy. Teaching was always my passion, you know." A smile tugged at the corners of her lips as she recalled the joy she had found in guiding young minds, a stark contrast to the emptiness she had felt in the years following their separation. "I'm glad to hear that," David responded. "You always were such a natural with the students. I always admired that about you." Maya's heart swelled at his words, a familiar warmth blossoming in her chest. "And you, David? What have you been up to all these years?" There was a pause before his reply appeared. "Running the family business, mostly. It's been fulfilling in a way, but there's always been a part of me that felt like something was missing." Maya nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "I know the feeling all too well," she admitted, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "David, I've never stopped thinking about you, you know?" Another pause, and then, "Neither have I, Maya. Not a day has gone by where I haven't thought about you and what might have been." Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks as she read his words, a mix of joy and sorrow washing over her. "Oh, David," she whispered, her fingers trembling, "I've missed you so much." "I've missed you too, Maya," he replied, his own voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. It's been so long, and yet I feel like I'm right back there with you, on that hilltop, watching the sunset." Maya nodded, her heart aching at the memory. "I remember that night so vividly," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We were so young, so in love, and yet the world seemed to be against us." "Yes," David replied, his response slow and thoughtful. "I still remember the pain of having to let you go, of watching you walk away. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do." Maya's fingers trembled as she typed her response. "It was for me too, David. I've never stopped wondering what might have been, what our lives could have been like if we had just run away together, like we had talked about." "I've wondered the same thing, Maya," David admitted, his words laced with regret. "But I suppose we'll never know. The past is the past, and we can't change it, no matter how much we might wish we could." Maya swallowed hard, her heart racing. "But what about the future, David? Is there any chance that we could That we could try again? The pause that followed felt like an eternity, and Maya held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, David's reply appeared on the screen. I, I, Maya, I would love nothing more, but I'm not sure if it's possible after all these years. So much has changed, and our families, they might not understand. Maya felt her heart sink, the weight of their shared history bearing down on her. I know, David, I know, but I can't help but think that maybe, just maybe, we could find a way. I've never stopped loving you, and I don't think I ever will. Another pause, and then, neither have I, Maya, neither have I. Maya's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her mind racing. This was it. The moment she had been waiting for, the chance to rekindle the love they had once shared. But the fear of the unknown, the weight of their past, loomed large. David, she typed, her fingers trembling. I don't know what to say. I want nothing more than to be with you again. But I'm scared of what our families might say, scared of what the world might think. Can we take this slow, figure things out together? The response came quickly, and Maya could almost feel the emotion behind David's words. Yes, Maya, yes, of course. I'm scared too, but I've waited so long for this chance. I don't want to lose you again. Let's take it slow, one step at a time. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her, a smile spreading across her face. Thank you, David. Thank you for understanding. I can't wait to see you again, to talk to you in person. It's been so long, and I have so much I want to say to you. And I to you, Maya, David replied. I'll make the arrangements to come visit as soon as I can. Until then, I'll be counting the days until I can see your face again. Maya nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of joy and trepidation. I'll be waiting, David. I'll be waiting. With that, they said their goodbyes, the weight of their shared history and the promise of a future together hanging in the air. Maya closed her laptop, a sense of hope and anticipation filling her. After all these years, the unexpected connection had been made, and the possibility of rekindling their love was within reach. Maya sat on her porch swing, her fingers tracing the familiar wood grain as she stared at the message on her phone. David's name glowed on the screen, a mix of excitement and trepidation swirling within her. After all these years, he had reached out, and the thought of speaking to him again made her heart race. Taking a deep breath, she tapped the screen to accept the call. A moment later, David's face appeared, his features etched with a mix of emotions, hope, uncertainty, and a touch of wistfulness. Maya, he said, his voice soft and tentative. I can't believe I'm actually talking to you. David, she replied, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. It's been a long time. An awkward silence fell between them, the weight of their shared history hanging in the air. Maya could see the questions in David's eyes, the unspoken memories that lingered like ghosts from their past. I'm sorry, he said, breaking the silence. I'm sorry for everything that happened back then, for not fighting harder to be with you. Maya felt a familiar pang in her chest, the pain of their separation still raw after all these years. It wasn't your fault, David. We were so young, and the pressure from our families was overwhelming. David nodded, his gaze dropping to his hands. I never stopped thinking about you, you know. All these years, I've wondered what might have been if we'd had the courage to run away together. Maya's heart clenched at the thought. the what-ifs she had grappled with for so long. I've thought about that too. So many times I've imagined how different our lives might have been. They fell silent again, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. Maya could feel Eleanor's presence behind her, a silent support as she navigated this delicate conversation. "So, what made you reach out now?" Maya asked, her voice soft. David's eyes met hers, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. I saw your profile on social media, and I just couldn't resist the urge to connect with you again. I've never been able to forget you, Maya. You've always been in my heart." Maya felt a lump in her throat, the raw emotion in his voice stirring something deep within her. "I've never forgotten you either, David. Not a day has gone by where I haven't thought about you." A small smile tugged at David's lips. "I'm glad to hear that. I've missed you, Maya, so much." "I've missed you too," Maya admitted, her own smile widening. "It's been so long, but I still feel this connection between us." David nodded, his eyes shining with a glimmer of hope. "I feel it too, and I'd like to try again, if you're willing. I know it won't be easy, but I want to see where this could go." Maya's heart raced, the prospect of rekindling their relationship both exhilarating and daunting. She glanced over her shoulder, meeting Eleanor's encouraging gaze. Turning her attention back to the screen, she took a deep breath. "I'd like that too, David. I'm willing to try if you are." A relieved smile spread across David's face, and Maya felt a flutter of excitement in her chest. As they continued their conversation, the weight of the past slowly began to lift, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism for the future. As Maya sat on her porch swing, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the oak tree that had stood witness to her childhood. She closed her eyes, letting the familiar scents and sounds transport her back in time. The laughter of children playing in the distance, the chirping of birds, and the faint aroma of freshly baked cookies from Mrs. Chen's kitchen, all of it evoked a deep sense of deep emotional connection to the town's essence within her. It had been decades since Maya had last set foot in this town, yet the memories remained as vivid as the day they were made. She could still see the image of a young David Chen, his warm brown eyes sparkling with excitement as they planned their future together on this very porch swing. Their dreams had been so simple then: to find happiness, to build a life side by side, to love each other without fear or judgment. A soft knock on the door pulled Maya from her reverie. She opened her eyes to find David standing there, a hesitant smile on his face. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the empty space beside her. Maya nodded, her heart fluttering like a butterfly in her chest. As David settled down next to her, the familiar scent of his cologne enveloped her, and she was transported back to their teenage years. "This porch swing," David began, his voice laced with reverence. "It holds so many memories for us, doesn't it?" Maya nodded, her fingers tracing the weathered wood. "Yes, it does. So many afternoons spent right here, dreaming of a future together." David's gaze met hers, and in that moment, the years melted away, and they were once again the young, hopeful lovers they had been. "I can still picture it, Maya, you and me, sitting side by side, talking about our dreams and our fears." He paused, his expression tinged with regret. "If only we had been stronger, more willing to fight for what we had." Maya reached out and gently squeezed his hand, the warmth of his skin sending a familiar jolt through her. "We were just kids, David. How could we have known the weight of the world that was about to bear down on us?" David's fingers interlaced with hers, a silent acknowledgement of the connection they had never truly lost. But we should have tried, Maya. We should have found a way to be together, no matter the cost." Tears glistened in Maya's eyes as she recalled the anguish of their parting. "It wasn't that simple, David. Our families, the expectations, the social stigma, it was all too much for us to overcome. We were caught in a web of fear and doubt, and we let it tear us apart." David nodded, his own eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I know. And I've spent every day since then regretting that we didn't have the courage to defy it all." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared past hanging between them. Maya could feel the familiar ache in her heart, the longing for what might have been. "Do you ever wonder," David began, his voice barely above a whisper, "what our lives would have been like if we had chosen each other?" Maya's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the sun was beginning to dip behind the distant hills. "All the time, David, all the time." In her mind's eye, she could see it, a life filled with laughter, love, and the comfort of a partner who truly understood her. A life where they had built a family, weathered the storms together, and grown old side by side. It was a vision that had haunted her for decades, a dream that had never quite faded. "I think about it too," David admitted, his thumb gently caressing the back of her hand. "The house we would have built, the children we would have had, the adventures we would have shared." He let out a wistful sigh. "It's a life I've longed for, Maya, even when I tried to bury those feelings." Maya turned to face him, her eyes shining with a mix of sorrow and hope. "But we're here now, David. After all these years, we've found each other again. Isn't that worth fighting for?" David's expression softened, and he brought her hand to his lips, placing a tender kiss on her knuckles. "It is, Maya, it is." Together they sat on the porch swing, lost in the memories of their past and the promise of their future. The world around them faded away, and in that moment, it was as if no time had passed at all. They were once again the young, hopeful lovers, determined to build a life together despite the obstacles that stood in their way. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the familiar landscape, Maya and David knew that the journey ahead would not be an easy one. But with each other by their side, they were ready to confront the past and embrace the possibility of a future filled with the love they had never truly lost. The sun was beginning to set over the familiar streets of Maya's hometown as David's car pulled up in front of her modest bungalow. Maya's heart raced with a mix of anticipation and trepidation as she watched him step out, his expression a blend of determination and unease. This moment had been building for days, ever since their initial reconnection, and now they were about to confront the ghosts of their shared pasts. As David approached the porch, Maya took a deep breath and opened the door, offering him a tentative smile. "I'm so glad you're here," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Come on in." Leading him into the cozy living room, Maya gestured for David to have a seat. "Can I get you something to drink?" she asked, ever the gracious hostess, even in the face of this charged reunion. David shook his head, his gaze fixed on Maya's face. "No, thank you. I just need to talk to you, Maya, about everything." Maya nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. She settled into the armchair across from him, bracing herself for the conversation to come. "I'm listening," she said, her eyes reflecting the weight of the past they were about to unpack. David took a deep breath, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. "I've thought about this moment for so long, Maya. About us, about what happened all those years ago. He paused, his brow furrowed with emotion. "I never stopped loving you, you know, not for a single day." Maya felt her heart constrict at his words, the pain of their separation still so palpable. "I know," she whispered, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I never stopped loving you either. But our families, the expectations, the fear, it all just became too much." David nodded, his expression etched with regret. "I was so afraid, Maya. Afraid of disappointing my father, of being disowned, of losing everything. And in the end, I lost the one thing that mattered most to me." He reached across the space between them, his hand hovering uncertainly. Maya hesitated for a moment before placing her hand in his, the familiar warmth of his touch stirring long-buried emotions. "We were just kids, David. We didn't know how to navigate all of that. But I've never stopped wondering what might have been." "Me neither," David admitted, his thumb gently caressing her knuckles. "I've spent so many years regretting the choices I made, the life we could have had together." A heavy silence settled between them, the weight of their shared history palpable. Then David's expression hardened, his gaze shifting towards the door. "My father is coming, isn't he?" Maya sighed, squeezing his hand. "Yes. I called him, asked him to come. I thought it was time we all confronted this once and for all." David's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with a mix of apprehension and defiance. "Maya, are you sure about this? He's not going to make this easy." Before Maya could respond, the sound of a car pulling up outside drew their attention. David's body tensed, and Maya felt a pang of sympathy for the man she had loved so deeply. "It's gonna be all right," she murmured, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze. "We're in this together, David, no matter what." The knock on the door was firm, the sound echoing through the house like a harbinger of the confrontation to come. Maya took a deep breath and rose to her feet, David following suit, their hands still intertwined. As she opened the door, the imposing figure of Mr. Chen stood before them, his expression stern and unyielding. "David!" the older man said, his voice laced with a mixture of disappointment and disapproval. "I should have known you would end up back here with _her_. David's grip on Maya's hand tightened, and she could feel the tension radiating from him. "Father, please, let's just talk about this." Mr. Chen's gaze swept over their joined hands, his lips pursing in a disapproving line. "There is nothing to talk about, David. I thought I made it clear all those years ago that this _relationship was unacceptable." Maya stepped forward, her free hand raised in a gesture of conciliation. "Mr. Chen, I know this isn't easy, but please, let's try to understand each other. David and we've been through so much, and—" "Understand?" Mr. Chen interrupted, his eyes narrowing. "I understand that you have corrupted my son, led him astray from his duties and his heritage. This is not acceptable, not in my family." David's expression hardened, and he released Maya's hand, taking a step towards his father. "Father, you don't understand. Maya is not the problem here. It was your expectations, your refusal to see us as anything more than our ethnicities, that tore us apart in the first place." Mr. Chen's face flushed with anger, and he jabbed a finger towards David. "Do not speak to me in that tone, boy. You have disgraced this family enough. I will not stand by and watch you make the same mistake again." Maya's heart raced as the confrontation escalated, and she reached out to David, placing a hand on his arm. "Please, let's all just take a deep breath and try to talk this through calmly." But Mr. Chen's gaze was fixed on his son, his expression unyielding. "You will end this underscore relationship underscore immediately, David. I forbid you from seeing this woman ever again." David's jaw clenched, and for a moment Maya feared he might lash out. But then, to her surprise, his shoulders slumped, and a look of resignation crossed his face. "I'm sorry, Father, but I can't do that. Maya and we've been given a second chance, and I'm not going to let it slip away again. Not this time." Mr. Chen's eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to find the words. You would defy me? After everything I've done for you?" David nodded, his expression resolute. "Yes, Father, I'm sorry, but my heart belongs to Maya. I love her, and I'm not going to let you or anyone else stand in the way of that." The older man's face contorted with a mix of anger and disbelief, and for a moment Maya feared he might strike his son. But then, to her surprise, a flicker of something akin to understanding passed across his features. "You truly love her, don't you, David?" he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. David nodded, his gaze unwavering. "More than anything, Father." Mr. Chen's shoulders sagged, and he let out a heavy sigh. I always wanted what was best for you, David. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I was only hurting you." He turned his gaze to Maya, his expression softening ever so slightly. "And you, Maya, I see the way you look at my son, the way you have always looked at him." Maya felt a lump rise in her throat, and she nodded, her own eyes shining with unshed tears. "I love him, Mr. Chen. I always have, and I always will." The older man was silent for a long moment, his brow furrowed in contemplation. Then, slowly, he reached out and placed a hand on David's shoulder. "Then, I suppose I have no choice but to accept this, for your happiness, my son?" David's eyes widened, and a tentative smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "Father!" Mr. Chen held up a hand, silencing him. "I cannot promise that this will be easy for any of us, but I will try. For you, David, and for the woman you love." Maya felt a surge of relief and gratitude wash over her, and she stepped forward, placing a hand on Mr. Chen's arm. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. Thank you for giving us a chance." The older man nodded, his expression softening ever so slightly. "I only hope that you can forgive an old man's stubbornness and that you both find the happiness you deserve." Maya took a deep breath as she walked hand in hand with David through the familiar streets of her childhood town. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the familiar storefronts and tree-lined sidewalks. It had been decades since she had last strolled these paths, yet the town felt both comfortingly unchanged and subtly transformed. "It's amazing how some things stay the same while others evolve," she mused, squeezing David's hand gently. He nodded, his eyes scanning the landscape with a mixture of deep emotional connection to the town's essence and wonder. "I can hardly believe we're back here, after all this time. It feels both foreign and yet so familiar." They wandered past the old diner where they had shared countless milkshakes and stolen kisses as teenagers. The neon sign still flickered above the entrance, a testament to the town's resilience. Maya smiled wistfully, recalling the carefree laughter and dreams they had shared within those walls. "Do you remember that night we snuck out and came here?" she asked, her voice soft with memory. "We sat in the back booth, talking about our future together until the early hours of the morning." David chuckled, the sound warm and rich. "How could I forget? We were so young, so full of hope and determination. If only we had known what was to come." Sadness flickered across his features, a reminder of the pain they had endured. But then his expression shifted, and he pulled Maya closer, his eyes alight with a renewed sense of purpose. "But we're here now, Maya. Against all odds, we've found our way back to each other, and this time I'm not letting you go without a fight." Maya felt a surge of emotion, her heart swelling with a mix of joy and trepidation. "I'm scared, David. So much has happened. So many years have passed. What if it's not the same? What if we can't recapture what we once had?" David stopped walking and turned to face her, his hands gently cupping her face. "Maya, my love, the years may have changed us, but our connection has endured. I've never stopped loving you, not for a single day, and I know, in my heart of hearts, that you feel the same." Tears glistened in Maya's eyes as she nodded, her hands reaching up to cover his. "I do, David. I've never been able to let you go, no matter how hard I've tried." They stood there, in the fading light, lost in each other's embrace. The weight of the past and the promise of the future hung in the air, a delicate balance that they both were determined to navigate. After a moment, Maya pulled back, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "Come on, there's somewhere I want to show you." Hand in hand, they made their way through the town, weaving through familiar side streets until they reached the edge of a small park. Maya led David up a winding path, the sound of their footsteps crunching on the gravel. "This is where we used to come, remember?" she said, gesturing to the hilltop that overlooked the town. "The view from up here was always so breathtaking." David nodded, his gaze sweeping across the landscape. "Yes, I remember. This is where we talked about running away, about building a life together, no matter the cost." A bittersweet smile crossed his features. "It's where we made the decision to part ways, all those years ago." Maya reached out and squeezed his hand. "I know. It was the hardest thing we've ever had to do, but look at us now, David. We're back, and this time, I don't want to let you go." David pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Nor do I, my love. We've wasted too much time apart. From this moment on, we're going to write a new chapter, one where we face the world together, no matter what obstacles come our way." They stood there, embracing on the hilltop, the setting sun casting a warm glow over their faces. In that moment, the past felt like a distant memory, and the future held the promise of a love that had weathered the test of time. As they reluctantly pulled apart, Maya reached up to caress David's cheek. "I think it's time we had a talk with our families. They deserve to know the truth about us, and about the love we've always shared." David nodded, his expression resolute. "You're right. It's time to confront the past and forge a path towards our future, together." Hand in hand, they began their descent, their steps lighter and their hearts filled with a renewed sense of hope. The journey ahead would not be an easy one, but they were determined to face it, side by side, as they had always dreamed. Maya took a deep breath as she and David approached her childhood home, the familiar bungalow standing as a testament to the life they once shared. 40 years had passed since they had last stood on this porch, their youthful dreams shattered by the weight of societal pressures and family expectations. But now, as they walked hand in hand, a renewed sense of purpose filled their steps. "Are you ready for this?" David asked, his voice soft with apprehension. Maya squeezed his hand, offering a reassuring smile. "As ready as I'll ever be. We've come too far to turn back now." With a nod, David reached out and rang the doorbell, his heart pounding in his chest. Moments later, the door swung open, revealing Maya's sister, Eleanor, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Maya! David!" she exclaimed, pulling them both into a tight embrace. "I'm so glad you're here." As they stepped inside, Maya felt a familiar wave of deep emotional connection to the town's essence wash over her. The cozy living room, adorned with her mother's paintings and her father's old armchair, held a lifetime of memories, both joyful and painful. David, too, could not help but be struck by the sense of familiarity, his mind racing back to the countless hours he had spent in this very house, dreaming of a future with Maya by his side. "Where's Mom?" Maya asked, her voice tinged with apprehension. "She's in the kitchen preparing dinner," Eleanor replied, her expression softening with understanding. "She's been looking forward to seeing you both." Maya and David exchanged a weighted glance, knowing that this moment would test the boundaries of their newfound reconciliation. Gathering their courage, they made their way to the kitchen, where Maya's mother, Evelyn, stood stirring a pot on the stove. "Mom?" Maya called out, her voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn turned, her eyes widening at the sight of her daughter and the man she had once loved. For a moment, the room fell silent, the tension palpable. Then, to Maya and David's surprise, Evelyn stepped forward and enveloped them both in a warm embrace. "My children," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "I've missed you so." Tears sprang to Maya's eyes as she melted into her mother's embrace, decades of unspoken pain and longing finally finding release. David, too, felt the weight of the past lift from his shoulders, his own eyes glistening with tears of relief. "I'm so sorry, Mom," Maya whispered. "I'm sorry we couldn't be the family you wanted." Evelyn pulled back, her hands cupping Maya's face tenderly. "Oh, my dear, I was the one who was wrong. I let my own fears and prejudices come between you and the love you shared. Can you ever forgive me?" Maya nodded, her heart swelling with a newfound sense of acceptance. "There's nothing to forgive, Mom. All that matters is that we're here, together, finally." David watched the exchange, his own heart brimming with emotion. Sensing his hesitation, Evelyn turned to him, her expression softening. "David," she said, reaching out to take his hand, "I know I've been a difficult woman, and I've caused you both so much pain. But I want you to know that I see you now, and I'm grateful to have you back in my daughter's life." David felt a lump rise in his throat as he squeezed Evelyn's hand, his voice trembling with emotion. "Mrs. Thompson, I don't know what to say. All I've ever wanted was to love your daughter, to give her the life she deserved. And I'm so sorry I couldn't do that before." Evelyn pulled him into a warm embrace, her own tears falling freely. "You've always had my daughter's heart, David, and now you have mine as well." The sound of a throat clearing drew their attention to the doorway, where Mr. Chen stood, his expression unreadable. Maya and David tensed, bracing themselves for the confrontation they knew was inevitable. "Father," David said, his voice steady despite the tremor of apprehension. Mr. Chen studied the scene before him, his gaze shifting from his son to Maya and back again. For a long moment no one spoke, the air thick with unspoken history and the weight of decades-old wounds. Then, to everyone's surprise, Mr. Chen stepped forward, his features softening with a sigh. "David," he began, his voice gruff but laced with a hint of regret. I owe you an apology, and to you as well, Miss Thompson." Maya and David exchanged a bewildered glance, their hearts pounding in anticipation of his words. "I was a stubborn, old-fashioned man," Mr. Chen continued, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I let my own pride and fear of losing my son's respect cloud my judgment. I robbed you both of the happiness you deserved, and for that I am truly sorry." David felt a lump rise in his throat, his eyes widening in disbelief. "Father, I—" Mr. Chen raised a hand, silencing him. "No, David, let me finish. I see now that the love you and Miss Thompson share is a rare and precious thing, one that transcends the boundaries of race and culture, and I would be a fool to stand in its way any longer." Turning to Maya, Mr. Chen offered a solemn nod. "Miss Thompson, I know I can never undo the pain I've caused you, but I hope that one day you can find it in your heart to forgive an old man's mistakes." Maya felt a surge of emotion, her eyes brimming with tears. "Mr. Chen, I don't know what to say." She reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "Of course I forgive you. We've all made mistakes. But the most important thing is that we're here, together, now." Yet they knew their path would not be free from judgment, as whispers in the small town already hinted at disapproval, challenging their resolve. A small, tentative smile tugged at the corners of Mr. Chen's lips as he nodded, the weight of years of resentment and regret finally lifting from his shoulders. In the doorway, Eleanor watched the scene unfold, her own eyes shining with tears of joy. She had always known that this moment would come, that the love between Maya and David was too strong to be extinguished by the barriers of the past, and now, as she witnessed the healing of old wounds and the embrace of a new future, her heart swelled with a profound sense of hope. As the family gathered around the table for dinner, the air filled with the warmth of reconciliation and the promise of a future unbound by the constraints of the past. Maya and David sat side by side, their hands intertwined, their eyes shining with a renewed sense of purpose. "I love you, David Chen," Maya whispered, her voice thick with emotion. David leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "And I love you, Maya Thompson, for the rest of my life." In that moment, the world beyond the walls of the bungalow faded away, and all that mattered was the strength of their bond, the resilience of their love, and the boundless possibilities that lay ahead. Together, they had weathered the storms of the past and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the future with open hearts and unwavering determination. Later that week, as Maya and David walked through the town square, the stares of familiar faces followed them. Whispers grew louder. Words like unconventional and, disgraceful floated through the air. Maya tightened her grip on David's hand, but her heart raced with the knowledge that their reunion was more than a private matter. It was a defiance of societal norms that still held sway over many. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. David met her gaze, his expression resolute. "Let them talk, Maya. We've already sacrificed too much to fear their opinions now."